Here it is, the 8th of February, and this happens to be right in the middle of National Burn Awareness Week. And you can count on Michael McLeieer at the fire safety organization E.S.C.A.P.E to talk to us a little bit about that. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Richard.
Thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
So when we talk about burns, are we talking about burns like household burns or fire burns?
Well, it could be both. This time of year, we highlight the fact that as we're cooking, as we're baking, as we come in contact with hot surfaces, maybe family has a hot radiator because the heating system is on in the home. We always have to be careful that we don't cause a burn, and especially with young children. So the first full week of February is always recognized as National Burn Awareness Week, and the focus is prevention. Let's prevent the burns from occurring in the first place. Most scald burns, for example, occur in the home and are typically related to everyday activities, as I mentioned, cooking, even eating or bathing. So making sure that hot water heater is not set too hot, making sure young children are supervised, and if they're turning the water faucet on, they understand which way is hot and which way is cold, which young ones don't always understand that, because whatever faucet we turn on, it usually comes out cold, and they don't realize there's a transition there. So, following safe practices and close supervision is always key to staying safe.
What's the most common household burn?
I would say probably the steam burn. If we are cooking in the kitchen, kids naturally are gravitated to what we're doing, and they want to be right in the middle of everything. And if we prevent that burn by creating a 3-foot kid-free zone from the stove, around the microwave, or around any hot foods, there's not the chance then a child could get right under our feet, or even pets could become a trip hazard and we spill something on them and cause that burn. When we're cooking, it's always best to make sure that pot handles are turned inward, and I always recommend using those back burners first, because sometimes young hands are curious and they put their hands up on the stove with these new ceramic countertops, flat stoves. You don't always know that the burner is on, and you don't always know it's hot like the old coil burners that many of us had in stoves. So always think about, again, where our children are, where people are, but even as adults, steam burns, if we're, removing things and we have a hot oven mitt that happens to be a little moist, that can cause a steam burn as we're removing food from the oven or microwave.
Reminds me of a friend of mine who has a young son. He's older now, but when he was younger, he was fascinated with cooking. So if mom was working at the stove, he wanted to be there watching. And so she could see that he had the curiosity that might result in an extending of the hand. And so she said one day, "Don't touch it. Do not touch it. Do not touch it." Touched it. And sometimes you're telling them don't touch it. It's hot. But sometimes practical experience is the best learning way. And in this case, it's not a good way.
Absolutely. I've got a friend of mine who actually told me what she does is when she has her grandchildren over and she's cooking, she has some refrigerator magnets that they can actually build some things and play games on the side of the refrigerator. It's well outside of that 3-foot zone. It occupies the child, and that way everybody stays safe. And I thought that was a really good idea to share that on air. Interesting.
And then they stay away from the stove.
They do, because they're occupied, and a lot of times it just is that curiosity or boredom that sets in.
We're talking with Michael McLeieer from E.S.C.A.P.E. It's National Burn Awareness Week, and we'll talk more about that when we come right back on 95.3 WBCK. We're here with Michael McLeieer from E.S.C.A.P.E. talking about burns, National Burn Awareness Week. And, some of the things that you used to hear about that once you become adults, you kind of laugh and say, I would never do that. But they do happen, particularly for young people. That whole finger in the outlet thing, you can get burned that way.
Absolutely. We don't often think about the wall outlets are a source of an electrical burn. It could cause even more severe injuries versus just besides the burn. It could cause cardiac arrest. Sticking items like paper clips or wires or things like that in the electrical outlets. So making sure, again, if we have young children over, we're using those plug covers, outlet covers, so that young hands are not curious. They're not putting things in those outlets. I do remember hearing on the news here recently that a child was burned by putting their tongue on the electrical outlet and was critically burned. So, again, prevention's the key, making sure that we understand that the curiosity is never going to go away. That's why we have to make sure we're attending to close supervision and making sure we're sharing best practices and following proper modeling, that we're not doing unsafe behaviors, performing unsafe behaviors around children. Young adults, for example, 20 to 29 years of age, have a probability of a burn injury, which is roughly 1.5 times the risk of the general population. When we start getting into our adolescence, we start getting into college students and so forth. Risk-taking is out there, and at that age, they don't often think about consequences. They don't often think about things are going to happen to them. The risk-taking continues to evolve, and bad things can occur. So we always have to think about the prevention is the key, and we've talked about that for years, making sure we prevent incidents from happening so they don't become a tragic situation that requires medical care.
I'm still thinking about the kid with the tongue on the power outlet. I mean, as an adult, you say, what are they thinking? Does it look like a piece of chocolate cake or something?
Exactly.
A critical burn from that?
You bet.
Oh,
And you stop and think what we see on television nowadays. And it could be something as benign as a cartoon, and a child may want to duplicate an action that they see on TV. So, again, even modeling what our children are watching on television and making sure that they understand what's real and what's fantasy. And sometimes young children can't differentiate between the two.
The other thing that you just said talks about the 20s. In our 20s, we're more liable to take risks. As it relates to burns, what might that be?
Well, it could be fireworks. You remember we've talked about now all of the major holidays. We think of just the 4th of July, but all the major holidays, Michigan allows for certain types of fireworks, and that would be an area of big concern, because if we have people using fireworks and maybe they have consumed alcohol or they're on medication, they may not be thinking clearly as far as safety. And again, if they've engaged in unsafe practices and nothing bad happens, we tend to, as humans, repeat that unsafe behavior.
Well, and I presume that for young people, perhaps younger than their 20s, there's got to be some repetitive education about this. I keep thinking about the example I talked about with my friend and her young son. Don't touch it. Don't touch it.
You bet.
Still touched it, yeah.
Yeah, what we want to remind everybody, think of just simple tools that are around the home, matches and lighters, for example. Curious hands see us as adults using those tools. We're not getting hurt, so we're inadvertently modeling that behavior to young children. And I've even had parents or caregivers that have said, well, I have my child go and get the matches or lighters or even their cigarettes and bring them to me. But what that does is it empowers that child to engage in that risky behavior, because they can't anticipate that a small match could burn an entire home or building down in a very short period of time.
Michael McLeieer is here from E.S.C.A.P.E. We're talking about National Burn Awareness Week. Don't get burned. 95.3 WBCK. A few more minutes with Michael McLeieer at E.S.C.A.P.E. By the way, you do a fair amount of education of young children through the schools and things about fire safety, and maybe there's a parent listening now or a teacher or something. How do you do that? How do folks arrange for you to come by and visit?
They can just give us a call right at our office, 1-800-707-1718, and we can take a look at our schedule. We bring Jake the fire safety dog out, and in some cases we'll even bring our 38-foot fire safety trailer, which looks like a home inside a bedroom, and we actually bring theatrical fog in. So it teaches families the importance of escape plans, get out and stay out, and what to encounter while they're safe in the trailer, but in an unsafe condition in their home, how to encounter smoke and fire conditions and get out safely.
We'll repeat that number before Michael's done with us today. National Burn Awareness Week. So we talked about how most often burns happen, but what are you supposed to do if you do get burned? There's a lot of old wives' tales, I think, on this.
There is. Well, if we do get burned, the first thing to do is, if it's a mild burn, a first-degree burn, red skin, or second-degree burn where there's blisters, run it under cool running water. Don't put ice on it. Don't allow the body tissue to become shocked even more. But cool running water pulls that thermal heat out, usually 15 to 20 minutes. Some of the things we don't want to use anymore: no butter, no lard, no creams, no ointments, no salves, because sometimes those will seal in the heat and lead to more burning. Other times, we can have people who are allergic to those topical solutions. So cool running water. If the burn is severe, seek medical attention. For third-degree burns, electrical burns, contact with fire or flame, or even a caustic chemical, those should require immediate medical attention. Don't put any liquids on those burns, and wrap it with a dry dressing, loosely fitted. The other thing to remember is removing any clothing. For example, if someone has had hot liquid spilled on them, maybe coffee or soup, that clothing will continue to act as an insulator, Richard, and we want to make sure we get the clothing off as quickly as possible so we stop that burning process.
Yeah, it's just going to hold that against you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think our grandmothers used to say that, put some butter on it. That was the thing, wasn't it?
It was. And, back in the day before refrigeration, I understand that was a common practice. But we've learned there's more science that has shown how tissue burns, how we can prevent the burns from progressing if we apply that cool water. And it needs to be for 15 to 20 minutes, not just 1 or 2 minutes, because we need to pull all that thermal heat out of the deeper layers of the skin.
Mm-hmm. So after that time elapses, you've run the water, then what? Do you put any sort of, disinfectant on it or something, or not?
What I recommend is wait about an hour after the initial burn. So the first 15 to 20 minutes, cool running water. Wait about an hour before you put anything on it. Sometimes families will want to put on their own person or on their children or another family member. They'll put aloe vera. But I'd still wait 1 hour before doing that on first or mild second-degree burns, because we don't want that to actually seal in the heat. Usually within that additional 40 minutes, up to the hour period of time, we'll be able to tell if that throbbing or burning is coming back, if we need to, seek additional medical aid.
Do we see the statistics of this going up or down or staying the same? What's happening?
Well, I think right now what we're seeing is in parts of the country, especially where we may not have a lot of education, a lot of awareness, we tend to see these burn injuries more critical. Some of our inner neighborhoods and things like that. As we get the messaging out, people are more in tune with, wow, I didn't realize I had to take that responsibility to watch out for everyone in the home to prevent the burns. Turning down that hot water heater so we're not causing scald burns, especially when there's shower or someone's taking a bath. Prevention's the key, and using just some good common sense. This is great information to share with neighbors, because a lot of times people will tell me, I didn't realize how simple it is to prevent injuries from occurring in the first place.
Mm-hmm. You talked about the water heater and setting that. What's an acceptable temperature?
Usually below 120 degrees is the acceptable. And again, I follow the guidelines that our child care providers are usually following, but usually less than 120 degrees is adequate. I know some folks want to set it higher because then they can have a really hot shower for a longer period of time, but that puts the family at risk, especially if we're talking those scald burn related injuries.
So just let's say a hotter amount of water is running in the sink. It's hotter than 120. Just putting your hand under there for a second is a burn risk?
It could be 1 to 2 seconds, Richard. Yes, that shorter period of time. The hotter the water, the greater the chance of a burn-related injury. And remember, when we have boiling water on the stove, we're at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, so it doesn't take long for that burn-related injury to occur. And it could become life-threatening, because if it's serious enough, then that individual has to have skin grafts. If it's a child, that stays with them through their lifetime. So prevention's the key.
Wow. Yeah, we don't want that. All right, National Burn Awareness Week this week. We'll put these safety tips up later today at WBCKFM.com, and the general first aid recommendations for burns and scalds will go up too. And you can access that information there. So, Michael, say that number again if folks are listening and maybe they'd like to have you and Jake come by and talk about fire safety to young people.
Absolutely. The toll-free number is 1-800-707-1718. They can just give us a call anytime.
All right. E.S.C.A.P.E, the fire safety folks. Michael McLeieer, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Richard. Thank you.